Hello, this is probably getting posted on Sean's channel, so I will take a brief moment to quickly introduce myself. My name's Chris. I have a booktube channel at Chris Bookish Cauldron. And yeah, Sean and I, along with a very faithful booktube watcher named Wilson, decided to buddy read this book, The Sea, the Sea. This has probably all been explained to you in some earlier portion of this vlog. But in case it hasn't, this is the book that we've been buddy reading. It's by Iris Murdoch, who is one of the most celebrated English writers of the modern era. So I've always wanted to read this book because it was described as being of the utmost literary quality, as well as the fact that it centered around a coastal area with the sea playing a central figure. And I always, heard that it was just phenomenal. So I decided I would give it a go with Sean and Wilson. So, at the time of filming this, I have decided to DNF this book. And I don't know if Sean or Wilson will continue on, but I am not continuing on. I don't like this book. I don't like it one little bit. I think it's complete rubbish, if I'm being honest. This has all of the elements of literary fiction that I think people find stereotypical about literary fiction and turns a lot of people off from reading it, and that it's incredibly pretentious. It's centered around this one dude who does absolutely nothing except look out the window, reminisce really pretentiously on his life. And when we finally do get some secondary characters onto the scene, the interactions are ridiculous and completely awful. So I'm gonna kind of go through my complaints one by one and as systematically as possible. So, if no one's explained already, this book follows a guy named Charles, couldn't even remember his name, Charles, as he retires from the theater and then goes to live in this beach cottage somewhere on some English coast. I can't remember what the English coast was. Okay, so he goes to this English cottage, and there we get an 88-page prologue where he's talking about his life, reminiscing about the sea, and describing the food that he eats. Okay, the thing about Charles, though, that you need to know is that he's a horrendous human being. One of the most awful people I've ever had to read about in fiction. He's a narcissist, a sexist, a misogynist, which I know is repetitive on top of sexist, but it deserves to be said because the dude's wildly misogynistic. So as many of those adjectives that you can throw onto there as possible, you would still not have as sexist of a character as you have with Charles. Every single person that he describes in his life, he has bettered them in some way simply by his existing in his own mind. And you just get these musings about how everybody else is complete rubbish except for him, and that's all you get for like 88 pages, and how much he hates women, distrusts them, and thinks that they're a horrendous, disgusting species. That's Charles for you. Now, I'm not saying that people like that don't exist, but if they exist, I don't particularly feel like spending 500 pages inside of the mind of one of those people. And there's only so much you can say about a person who is so two-dimensionally awful before it's just repetitive, repulsive, and it gives you that creepy, crawly feeling all over your skin. It's just, irritated the crap out of me. On top of that, Charles goes on these really pretentious rampages, musings about everything and anything, and just the most awful, pseudo-intellectual way possible, and it just drove me absolutely crazy, and there seemed to be no point to them. Musings about, whether or not dinner parties were pretentious or elitist, and what kind of food being served at dinner parties said about the people hosting the parties. And blah, 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 blah. It was awful, it irritated the crap out of me. And then you also get lengthy descriptions of what he's eating on a day-to-day basis. He's just updating you about his food. He has to tell you what he's eating. Now, Iris Murdoch is doing nothing in this book to dispel the stereotype that British people eat nasty food. And I'm not trying to be mean, that's just a stereotype that exists, okay? We can all acknowledge that. This dude eats anchovy paste on toast, boiled onions, and lentils. Grosses me out, and I guess that's like a really minor detail and didn't really ruin the part about the book, but you would just get these gross descriptions of the food that he was eating again and again and again and again and again, and there was just no point. There was no point to any of it, outside of the fact that she was describing the most detestable human being to walk this earth. And then finally, you get a couple of women on the scene who might interact with him. You either get the kind of woman that's incredibly servile to him and has fallen under his spell, which I found incredibly irritating, or you get the kind of women that fulfill his stereotypes about women, that they're untrustworthy, that they hold grudges, that they're ridiculous and melodramatic, all of that. So in the end, I got to page 108, and I decided I could not continue on. Not one more page could I read of this terrible, terrible, awful character, with writing that went in and out of being beautiful prose to very mediocre prose, back to beautiful prose, back to very mediocre prose. No, I was done. Just absolutely 100% done with this book. So I don't plan on continuing on. I don't think I'll ever pick up Iris Murdoch again. She's just a big no for me. However, I don't know whether or not Wilson or Sean are continuing on, so I'll see about that. But for now, I'm DNFing it. No. But we'll see how they think of it at the end, but it's just, I can't do it anymore. Maybe they'll end up really liking it, in which case I'll feel like the odd one out. But if either of them DNFs it, I'll feel very vindicated because I hated it first. Alright, so that's my portion of this vlog, and we'll see what Sean and Wilson think together. Have a good one, guys. Bye.
Hello, BookTube. Hello, Sean and Chris. I'm Wilson. I have never made a BookTube video before, but I have been wanting to for quite a while. I've taken this introductory kind of shot several times already, and have not been satisfied with it any time, until it occurred to me that I should really be treating this as a kind of a conversation just that I'm having with a friend. That's what I'm going to be doing. And I'm just going to ramble and talk as though, you know, the people who are watching this video were in the room with me, and see how that goes. Like I said, I'm Wilson. I plan to start making BookTube videos. So if you would like to subscribe, feel free to. If you're watching this on Sean or Chris's channels, then the link to my channel might be in the description. But if not, it's just my name, Wilson Shugart. And yeah, on to the book. This is my first Iris Murdoch, and I know very little about Iris Murdoch other than that she was a professor of philosophy, and I saw a film about her starring Judi Dench and Jim Broadbent and Kate Winslet. Although that film doesn't tell you much about her work, because it's based on the memoir that her husband wrote. Anyway, I'm losing the plot. The point is, I'm here to do a buddy read Vee-Log, as Sean says. So I just wanted to make this quick introduction where you got to actually see my face and say hello to BookTube, and I'm very happy to be making my first video, and I'm excited to, join in conversations and connect with other readers and that kind of thing. So yes, on to the video, or on to the real content of this video. For the sake of convenience, as well as for the sake of the length of this video, I have decided to comment on the book over the vlog footage that I took for this video. Now what you're looking at is a state park that is near where I live, and I love it, and it's 100-acre wood with a nice big lake to one side, and I go there as often as I can. So, on to the book. I have to say, when I started Iris Murdoch's The Sea, I absolutely loved it. I not only loved it, but I thought I had fallen in love with it. I was talking about, potential best reads of 2018 to myself, and had an idea that it might be one of my favorite Booker winners, the whole 9 yards. And by the time I got halfway through the book, we'll get to that later. So Charles Arrowby Araby, our grumpy, snobbish, kind of persnickety narrator, to me is really quite endearing at the beginning of the book. His particularities about everything and his funny way of describing food and the landscape and his ability to occasionally say some interesting and even beautiful things really beguiled me in a way, and I was taken in by the book. Now you'll notice I've just gone the same path twice, and that was to remind myself to talk about the repetitive or cyclical nature of the narrative that Charles presents to us. He has these recurring obsessions and ideas, whether it's the sea of the title or his strange taste in food, or reminiscing bitterly about his past, or thinking about how he's better than everyone else on the face of the earth, or his paranoia over the quasi-19th century Gothic atmosphere that he's got going on this little beachside hovel he's made his retirement home. And really, I initially liked the cyclical nature of the narrative and of Charles. Murdoch, each time she would return to these things as the author, would give us a little nuance, show a little change in the way Charles was thinking about something or the way the plot was developing. And it was an entertaining feature of the storytelling for me for quite a while. But right around the page 150 mark, those nuances and those subtle changes stopped happening altogether. Charles is finally confronted by someone from his past who is actually willing to stand up to him for once. And you would think that would be amazing, but it simply falls into melodrama. And once melodrama became a part of that cycle that the story had itself on, I completely just lost my willingness to believe in the story. Now, add to that fact that around about the same time in the book, we learn that Charles Araby is in fact not a persnickety kind of laughable old man, but a horrific abuser and misogynist who has mistreated countless people over the course of his very privileged lifetime. I lost just about any reason to believe that this book was going to, pull off anything excellent or enjoyable. On top of that, you have one coincidence after another stacking up in the plot of this book until by the midway point you're given something so classically cliche in terms of character backstories and narratives that I just had to put down the book. Now, I think I'm finding the book intelligently written, even if I'm not enjoying the actual reading experience. And I do want to finish the book and, give it its full shot. There are things about it that I have enjoyed, the Tempest references and the way Murdoch is playing with the idea of the author and the text and the reader and how all of these relate. But I'm not sure that I could call it a successful book, at least in my opinion. Now, before I finish off here, I just want to say a quick thanks to you guys, Sean and Chris, for the opportunity of trying my hand at a BookTube video. And I will keep you guys up to date as I read on. And I do plan to make a part 2 of this vlog when I finish the book, put on my own channel. So you guys can look out for that. And in the meanwhile, I have very much enjoyed it.
Hey BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. So doesn't get much more Japanese than this, hey? So I'm just going to do a very quick wrap up of my feelings on the first half of the book, or almost the first half of the book. I've been wanting to read Iris Murdoch for years, especially more recently. The buddy read was a great way to get started. So you've heard from Chris of Chris Bookish Cauldron, and you've heard from Wilson. Doesn't he need to start his own channel? Hey! And now you're going to hear from me. Iris Murdoch is an amazing writer. I underlined half of this book, and half of those underlinings were because the writing just made me gasp. It just started out brilliantly, and it's a very unconventional structure, kind of written in a journal format, and the narrator, Charles, is a 60-year-old theater director and former actor who has moved to the seaside far from London to get away from his disaster of a personal and/or love life. And he's writing this journal. He is a prickly, unlovable, absolutely fascinating character that in the first section especially, I couldn't help but find rather endearing, but certainly deeply fascinating. And it seems like he's at a crossroads of his life, and he's going to kind of discover himself through writing a journal, writing his life. And I was on board for all of that. And his love life was a disaster. I thought the writing was gorgeous, so much of it. And the setting of this old, mysterious house that was so creepy. The atmosphere was really gothic, and I don't usually do gothic, but it was really working for me here. And a serpent comes out of the sea. And there's strange noises in the house. And I would say, in many ways, the main character here is the sea. And this is some of the most gorgeously evocative writing about the sea that I've ever read in my life. Breathtakingly gorgeous descriptions of the setting. But by the end of the third chapter, but it was called History Chapter 2, basically all of his old girlfriends and loves, they follow him there. And so very quickly it becomes a portrayal of obsessive love. Either the women for him or him for one woman in particular, although he gets obsessive about all of them at various points. And I quickly hated it. I don't like reading about obsessive love, and I don't like being trapped in kind of Tennessee Williams-esque Liz Taylor and Richard Burton in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, kind of shouty, obsessive, untrustworthy, completely bilious interpersonal dynamics. I hate that, and that's what happened. So I've bailed. I appreciate that this is a book that many people liked. It won the Booker. Lots of readers who I deeply respect. It's one of their favorite novels. I hated it, and I couldn't finish. I got to maybe halfway, 3/4 of the way through History Part 3, and he and two of his girlfriends were in the kitchen. It was laughable, but also it was Fatal Attraction, and I thought the writing wasn't very good. The people were, I don't need to love the people, I don't, but I need to at least care what happens, and I just stopped caring. These people were so ridiculous that I couldn't even really hate them. If you like an unreliable narrator, this was one of the most unreliable narrators I've encountered, and maybe that was part of the problem for me, but I'd have to think about that some more. I think it was just, I hated the interpersonal dynamics. I often say I could feel my gorge rising, and this was literally true. I could feel my gorge rising. And when I got to that kitchen scene where they're turning the table over and starting to have little girly fights, and these are 60-year-olds or 50-year-olds, it just made me sick. So no, I hated this book passionately, despite the many things that were very promising at the beginning. Iris Murdoch and Barbara Pym were friends. Especially, is it John Bailey that was Murdoch's husband? He and Barbara were great friends. Iris Murdoch didn't like Barbara Pym's novels at all. I haven't heard anything about Barbara Pym's opinion on Iris Murdoch's novels, but I stand with Barbara. I love Barbara Pym, and I don't think Iris Murdoch is for me, so I have bailed. But it was a really fun buddy read. Hope to get all the way to the end of a book with these two guys, because they are brainier and more perceptive than all get out. It was a great experience, even though the book wasn't so much. Thanks for watching.